Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Game Develop Repeat. Halloween's coming up. I realized I've unintentionally been in a spooky mood since the last episode, even the one before that. One episode was how making games is scary, and then we did Dredge, which is a spooky game, and now we're doing MediEvil, which is arguably a Halloween game. You play a skeleton. Next week, I'm planning on, no promises, maybe it doesn't come through, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be covering Splatterhouse 3. That's a good one. I cannot impress upon you how good that game is. For the time that it was released, it is insane. So we'll get into that next week, hopefully. Also, a crazy episode today because if all goes according to plan, and I hope that it does, my game will be out this Friday. So between recording this episode, by the time I record the next episode, I will have released a game. And then we will do an episode kind of about that process and trying to be helpful for anybody in the community who's working towards releasing something in the future. So we'll talk about that later too. Anyway, you can tell this is an abnormal intro because this is an abnormal week. There's a lot going on for me. It's really hype. And I'm trying to loosen up the intros a little bit. But anyway, for anybody who's new here, this is the podcast where we talk about a game that I enjoy, what makes it special, and what we as game developers can learn from it. I am your host, Chris, aka Anxious Buddha. That's a new one for you. That's my developer name on Steam, at least for the moment. What was I saying? I'm a music educator turned indie game developer, and today's episode is all about MediEvil. Let's get to it. If I had to describe MediEvil in a short, tight little explanation, I think I would just call it a fun romp. I think it's just a fun little game. It's just a cool adventure. It's kind of goofy. It's enjoyable. It's got some good combat stuff. It's got some good platforming. It's got its frustrating moments for sure. You've got some cool story. You've got just some interesting little old comedy quips and stuff. It's just a nice PlayStation era kind of 3D platformer thing. And this is a game you can play. There is a re-release of it, a modern remake of it on a digital PlayStation store. I don't know if it was the PS4 or the PS5, but it's probably PS5. I'm not, whatever. I haven't bought a new console in a long time. The newest console I own is the Switch. I've been a little too deep in the whole PC rabbit hole. Yeah, but MediEvil's a cool game that you can get access to if you want to. It's not in my personal gaming history, MediEvil stands out, but it doesn't stand out as one of the legends, I think we all have those games that almost shape us in terms of our tastes in gaming, right? Final Fantasy VII is a legend for a lot of people. Warcraft 3, Diablo 2, maybe League of Legends for the younger crowd. Maybe if you grew up with that, right? Something even Worms, actually. Worms is a legend game for me. That is a game that really shaped some of my mindset. And something man, I have a lot of these games, huh? I've got Soul Calibur, or not Soul Calibur, I'm sorry, Soul Reaver. Soul Calibur might be one for people too, or Bloody Roar. There's all these games that really stand out and grab your attention. MediEvil stands out in a different way. MediEvil is that game that was just fun. It was just a good game. I would just play it and go, this is a good time. I'm enjoying this. And I don't know. There's a difference there. And it stands out pretty strongly as a good game, as an enjoyable game. But I think it's that there's no one mechanic that blew my mind, and that's why it's not some weird legend in my game, in my brain. Sorry. Um, Everything about this game is just solid. If there is one thing that really stood out to me, it is the mood of it. It's got this whole spooky kind of Nightmare Before Christmas thing to it, but it's like a comedy thing. It's a goofy game, but it's goofy and it also feels kind of apocalyptic as you're playing it. It feels like there's high stakes, but you meet weird characters, even though everything's going really poorly in the world. You're running into these people who manage to still be like strange, interesting characters. It's like all the personalities still shine through. I think there's something that can happen in a game where if things are going poorly, if the world is at risk, if everything is so dangerous and whatever. I don't even remember the actual plot of MediEvil, I'm realizing. I think it's a world-ending thing. It's kind of vague to me. I remember the characters, though. And I remember their distinctive personalities. Like, I remember... I guess the point I'm getting at, I don't want to get into all the nitty-gritty and get lost in the details. The point I'm getting at with this is the personalities don't get overtaken by the gravity of the situation. And I think that's a take that I would like to see more often. I think too often character personalities disappear in the conflict. Like, you hear about the conflict, there's this whole thing going on, there's everything is horrific and the world is falling apart and whatever, and then you lose all the playfulness and the character and the goofiness. Final Fantasy VIII has some characters that shine despite the conflict, and some of them are a little controversial, like Zell. Some people hate Zell, right? I like Zell. I've always liked Zell. He's obnoxious. He's really, really obnoxious, but I've always liked him. His personality shines through. The freaking same game. Oh my god, am I forgetting the names of Final Fantasy VIII characters right now? Irvine. I was about to call him Vincent. Irvine, his personality shines through, although a lot of his personality is just like weird, stereotypical, like womanizer guy. But that's a good example. Final Fantasy VIII has this thing where personalities shine through. And the reason I'm not naming specific characters in MediEvil is because I don't remember specific character names, because the names did not shine through. But the main character, despite being a skeleton that is voice acted primarily through grunts, right? Like, he doesn't have like voice lines. His character shines through. A lot of the people that you meet in this sort of Hall of Heroes thing have some specific, you get powers from these kind of ghosts. I'll leave it there, because that's one of the fun parts of this game for me. But as you visit specific ones, you get certain powers from them, and you learn a little bit more about them, and they kind of show who they are, and they're some of them are like arrogant and self-absorbed, and it's nice. It's great. You don't get to know any of them really deeply, but you get these little moments, these little glimmering moments of like goofiness and lore and this feeling that everything is not that heavy, and you can just kind of enjoy the game. Now, there are issues that I have to mention, because this is a game that I'm pseudo recommending. I'm like, oh, you can find it if you want to. I don't know what the price point is. I have to point out that the camera control is an issue. There are moments in this game where I was like, this camera is driving me crazy. It's getting in my way, and it's really frustrating. And I would look into some reviews, see if the most recent re-release of that fixed that. From what I understand, it did not fully fix it. I remember looking into it a little bit. This was a long time ago, look into it on your own a little bit. But if a little camera control issue gets under your skin, then it may not be for you. But it managed to be pretty entertaining for me, despite the fact that I don't gravitate towards platformers, especially 3D platformers, and it has camera control issues, which does drive me crazy. Final Fantasy 15, my biggest gripe with it, other than the entire end chunk of the game, everything after the open world ends. I'll get into that some other time maybe. My biggest gripe with it was uh, the camera stuff. There were a lot of camera issues in Final Fantasy 15 that kind of drove me crazy. I do like that game, though. Having said that, that's a good game. It's an enjoyable game. There are things about it that make me extremely frustrated, and that's one of the reasons why I haven't covered it on this show, because I tend to try to focus on things I like about specific games, but there's a lot that's really good about that game as well. I think part of the reason this game lands for me, MediEvil, I think part of the reason MediEvil lands for me is because it's not a pure platformer. It's got this feeling of like a little bit more control, a little bit more customization, a little bit of RPG stuff, a little bit of skill, and it's got this adventure story behind it. And I'm realizing this is when I start going off the rails a little bit. I'm realizing more and more how important story is to me. My game that I've just made doesn't have a story in the game. In my brain it has a story, right? And there's this compulsion now for me to have a game that has a story. And I think that adds a lot in terms of development, but it adds so much in terms of flavor. And I would just really like to create something with a narrative. But I'm going off on a tangent here. One other thing about this game that I really appreciated is just the like, it's a skeleton game. It's like a Halloween vibe, and it's chill and goofy and fun. That's a nice combination. I always like that. I always like mixing things like that. Like, you could, like, if you like make like a horror Christmas movie, I'm like, that's cool. I don't know that I've watched those, but I think that's a cool idea, right? If you take some holiday and spin it differently, especially if it's for like comedy purposes, I think that's fun. I think it's nice to have a good blend of like spooky scary and, oh, we're actually just kind of goofing around, don't worry about it. But also, hey, look, it still kind of looks spooky. Everything looks spooky, but it's kind of just fun, isn't it? Right? So you can get spooked out for a second, and then you're like, oh, this is just fun. And like, look at these vibes. Like, scary things aren't always scary. It's like I don't know if any of you are into this, but I like things that are like ugly cute. I'm obsessed with pugs. I think pugs are adorable. I think dogs with squishy faces are really cute. There are issues around getting a pug and how expensive it would be, and them having a poor breathing problems and all this stuff. But visually, like, I acknowledge all that, but pugs are cute, right? They're just cute to me. I'm one of those people. And maybe if you're one of those people too, you might have this tendency to of like, give me a mix of things that aren't really supposed to go together and make them go together smoothly. I love that. That's beautiful. As far as my own game development, your game development, what are the things that we can learn from MediEvil? I think one thing is this method of blending genres that they're doing. They're not doing this like super aggressive, hard blend where they just like take two things that are super opposed and smash them together and like polish off all the rough edges and get rid of everything that doesn't work together and kind of refine it like that. They're more just kind of going, hey, what if you had a platformer, but also you had some attacks and stuff, right? Like, what if platformer with some gear and attacks? It's not like totally out of this world, but it's executed really well, and they have interesting different choices. They add a little bit of RPG stuff in it, but they don't go so hard into it that it's like you get lost in this frustrating mess of menus or anything like that. No, it's just, hey, look, here is a nice significant chunk of mechanical stuff you can do, and here's a good significant little chunk of platforming stuff you can do. Neither of them gets in the way of the other, and you can just enjoy everything that this has to offer, right? There's not like this super, super frustrating element to it. It's all pretty smooth. It's all pretty well blended together. Now, the camera is a thing, but the genre blend is pretty smooth. There are little puzzles in this game too. I'm just remembering that now. There are little puzzles. They're all very simple. I appreciate that because when I was a child, I hated puzzles. I'm still not big on puzzles. It's weird programming games when you don't like puzzles because people are like, oh, if you have like a puzzle mindset, it's great for programming. No, dude, I puzzle games make me go like, I have a solution in mind and you're not letting me do it and it's going to make me lose my mind. Like I should be able to do this and I can't because it's a game and it's not real life, so I can't just do this weird thing. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. Apologies. I'm recording late at night, so maybe I'm like slightly grumpy or something cuz it's the end of the day. So anyway, we'll get back on track right here. Okay, where was I? It has a few puzzles. I appreciate that it doesn't give you really difficult puzzles. That's one of the reasons I never got into like the Zelda games and stuff. I just like the difficult puzzles. I'm like, I'm trying to have an adventure, man. The focus for me is the adventure, is exploring and all that stuff. I guess what I'm saying is when you're blending genres, you know, which one's the priority? Which one is having the biggest impact on the play, on the gameplay? Is one getting in the way of the other? And if it is, how difficult is the one that's getting in the way? Because if you've got somebody who's mostly here for the gear, is the platforming too difficult? Because they'll probably never get to the gear. Is the strategy of unlocking the right things too complicated and it's getting in the way of the guy who just likes the platforming? And which one's your priority? Are the puzzles too hard? That's the one for me. If the puzzles are too hard, I'm out, dude. That is the quickest way to make me quit a game is puzzles that are too hard or a grind that I just can't tolerate. I've grinded too much in my youth. I played too much Final Fantasy VIII. I drew too much magic, and I am not doing that again. I say that. I probably will. I probably will at some point do something like that. The other part, making the most out of these like unconventional ideas and unconventional theming. They've got this interesting thing where you're going and you're getting abilities from ghosts, and you could have just gone, oh, you just get abilities from ghosts. No, they like went, hey, here's some personality. Here's this whole place that you go and you visit. It adds all this lore. It adds all this flavor. It's a huge part of the game. They're making the most out of this idea of kind of like it's almost like a Valhalla situation, right? There's like a hall of heroes that you're visiting and getting stuff from, and like different gear, and it's a whole cool mechanic that I absolutely love. They're making the most out of the theming, right? They're taking it and they're giving it this like Halloween theme, and they're making the most out of the fact that this character is a skeleton and he's come back from the grave and he can't speak, so they like use that for comedy stuff. And all of these little how do I put this? It's so hard to put my finger on exactly the lessons that I'm learning from this game. Like I feel like I'm just skirting around the borders of it. Like I'm just kind of like floating around exactly what it is, and I really want to get to the point of it. I think part of it is like looking at the game as a whole. Because if you look at the game as a whole, it's clear that this is a really good game. And if you look at your own game as a whole, I think part of this, though, it's tricky. If you've been making it, you can get blind to it, right? So like maybe you're playing, you're like, yeah, this is great as a whole. This is an amazing game, and then somebody else plays it and they're like, this isn't that good. Or you look at it and you're like, this is so boring, and they're like, what are you talking about? This is fun. Well, that's because you've put hundreds of hours into it. You can put hundreds of hours into your favorite game and get exhausted from it, right? So like, it's hard to just say look at the game as a whole as like a takeaway, but I do think there's something to do with how is everything meshing. Maybe like looking at the seams a little bit and saying like, is this getting in the way of that? Are the story and the gameplay misaligned? I played a demo. I'm not gonna name the game because I don't want to bash a game, but it suddenly feels very relevant. I played a demo for a little bit today because I had this game idea and I was like, ooh, this is the closest thing I know of. It's in a different genre, but some of the theming is a little similar, right? I have no idea if I'll ever make this game. So anyway, I go in and I start playing this demo and I was like, how do they handle this? How do they handle that? And the story opening this game was nothing like what I expected. It was completely different. And then I was like, okay, all right, we're just on a whole different path here. we're starting with a very different story basis than I thought we were. Cool, fine. There's the foundation. Let's work from there. And then it was like, oh, actually, that's not the foundation. We're actually starting from here. And I was like, okay, I guess the story's this now. I guess we're going to go from here. And then it was like, oh, actually, let me just throw this in there too. It kept changing the basis of the story. And then by the end of it, I was like, what is this game about? This has nothing to do with what I thought I was about to play. Like what I'm getting at is the story was such a mismatch for the gameplay that I walked into. I was like, I'm looking for this specific gameplay. I know what I'm looking at. I've like, I'm aware of what I'm getting into. And I started it and I was like, this is completely unrelated, but okay, I'm with you. I'm giving you a yes and I'm going, okay, let's check this out. Cool. I was off base. I was thinking it was one thing and it was something else. And then it just kept switching on me and switching on me. And then I was like, by the end of that, I was like, this doesn't line up with the gameplay at all. It went through like 4 different weird ideas for the story, all of them really disjointed, and none of them seemed to have any connection with what I was about to start learning about and figuring out and playing. And it was just like I was thrown into a fever dream in a game that didn't feel like it was supposed to be a fever dream based on the theming. And I don't know, maybe this is just me. It's a well enough reviewed game, so like we all just have our own tastes, but it really threw me. And sorry to be so vague, I don't want to bash a game by name, right? I just want to get this concept across of I said that at some point I'm going to bash a game by name, but it is going to be like some big name game, right? Like it's inevitably, like I think earlier I said something negative about Final Fantasy 15, even though I love that game. It's going to happen occasionally. I don't intend to, and usually if I mention a game, it's because I like it enough to talk about it, right? I'm getting so sidetracked. The point that I was making is I think you can look at something like that and you can go, does this story make sense for this game? Does this actually connect? If I'm walking into this first time playing this game, does the story get in the way or does it get you more excited for the game? Do the elements of this game tie together? Do they all connect in a way where you go, yeah, this makes sense. This is this is all lining up. I see it all in front of me. It's making sense. Or are you just like, I don't know, dipping fish sticks in the chocolate fountain, like what are you just doing something totally out of pocket, really wild? And if you are, is it working? Is it putting grit in there in the system? Is it making everything really rough and gross? Because I think sometimes it is. But there are people who like dipping fish sticks in a chocolate fountain, and if you want to make that, make that. But know that you're making that and make sure that you don't disguise it as a chicken nugget, which is far more delicious than a chocolate fountain. I am, of course, not being serious. I've not tried either of those though, and you know what? I'm not going to. This podcast is very different when I record late at night, isn't it? I go on weird food-related tangents. Okay, last bit to mention for this chunk before we move on towards the end here. Small issues can make a huge difference. That is, I hate focusing on negatives, but I do have to point this one out again. A small issue like the camera thing can do a lot to the game. And I don't know how to navigate that one. That's obviously something people are still struggling with to this day. Some people have pulled it off, some games have pulled it off, some games have not. But in a 3D platformer, that camera management thing, oh man, it can make a really big difference. So, I don't know, make sure you look at your game from the start and say, what's going to be the thing that the player is constantly interacting with? What are they just always going to be doing? Are they always going to be moving the camera around? Because if so, that should work well. Are they always going to be landing on platforms? If so, that should work well, or it should work as intended, right? There are going to be differences in taste. I'm going to use my own game as an example here. One of the things that I worry about is I have made a very deliberate choice to make things in this platformer feel very like, what's the word for it? In my opinion, solid. There are a lot of moments like you stick to a wall, it's like it's got to do the animation to stick to the wall, and if you're jumping off, it's got to do the animation to jump off. It's pretty quick, but a lot of platformers are very, very quick with their controls. They're very tight, very fast, almost like twitchy, right? I didn't want that. I wanted things to feel different because I'm not somebody who likes twitchy, jumpy, super fast stuff in a platformer. I want something to be like just a little slower, just a little more contemplative in a couple moments, and have a little bit more consequence. There's one animation in this game that somebody was like, "Hey, you should speed that up." And I was like, "I see that. I understand that perspective. And I've played with this at different speeds, and I'm very happy with the speed that it's at." And it is the launch animation for my game. It is an animation where you jump way higher. And I want you to be locked in place when you do that, because I want there to be a punishment if you're doing it at a bad time. I don't want you to be able to just launch into the air in an instant, right? I want it to take a second. I want you to know that if you press that button too late, you screwed up and you're getting hit by a flame or an icicle or whatever, and you need to time it and you need to pay attention to that timing. And I do worry that some people are not going to like that. And that's a matter of taste. And within the genre, like that's a risk that I took based on my own preferences. Because this first game I was making it because it was the platformer I wanted to play. And fingers crossed other people see that and enjoy it. And there are other people out there who are like, "Yeah, I like this approach. This is really nice." So fingers crossed on that one. But yeah, I don't know. Small things that you're regularly interacting with are super, super important. That's a big takeaway here too. I already talked some about my own game. Last part of this development section is me talking about my own game development. I'm brainstorming for my next game already. I had an idea. I'm hyped on it. I've had a bunch of ideas. And I'm at this moment here. And I don't know, maybe somebody out there in the audience has experienced this. Maybe there's like a career developer out there who knows something and can like relate to this or give me information on how it's worked out for them, right? I was pretty determined to learn Unreal Engine. The game idea that I just had is very much a 2D game idea. It is not a 3D game idea. It wants to be pixel art in my brain. I can see it, and I'm very interested in it, but I may completely ignore it depending. If I learn Unreal Engine, it's more of a career move. It's pretty great, right? It's more of a like industry career move. It might be a little safer as far as like getting a job and over the long term building experience and all this good stuff. If I focus in on these indie game ideas, that's great too, but I got to pick an engine to learn for that. And Godot is not like a good career move engine, I don't think. I'm not going to keep using Unity because, things we all know. And then I'm not going to I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of like, well, it's either Godot or Unreal, and like maybe I look into Game Maker and stuff like that, but those are really the big two for me at the moment. So yeah, I'm torn there. I'm brainstorming stuff, and I'll figure it out. I'll play around with stuff. I'll try different things. That's ultimately how I'm going to end up figuring it out, is just by trying stuff out. My game comes out on Friday, by the way. It's coming out on Friday, so I would love for you to play it. If any of you want a copy and you don't want to pay for it, or you can't pay for it, I recognize that like sometimes you can't even justify spending $1. One of the reasons why I priced this game so low is I want it to be as widely accessible as possible, and I want to make sure that everybody gets value for it, right? That's why it's 99 cents. I want you to be able to just sell some Steam cards and get the game. But even with that, you may not be able to justify spending $1, or you may not really care enough to spend $1. But if you're curious about the game and you care enough to email me, then just email me and I'll send you a copy. It's cool. No hard feelings. Just I want people to play the game. That's why it's priced at 99 cents. So just email me. I'll send you a copy, right? If you're a listener of this podcast, you've been listening this whole time, hit me up. It's fine. The email is anxiousbuddhagames@gmail.com. It's anxiousbuddhagames@gmail.com. It is coming out Friday. I hope y'all get a chance to play it. I would love to hear feedback from people who I do not know. That would be incredible. That would be a dream come true. Yeah, it's the more that I learn from this experience, the better. That is ultimately what I've been aiming for this whole time. That's why I'm doing all of this stuff. I'm putting in all this stuff into this whole process and making the podcast, contributing to other podcasts, getting feedback from wherever I can, releasing it on Steam. The whole process is just so I can learn and so I can make something cool to share with people. And I think I've accomplished both. But now at this phase, the more data I can collect, the more I can hear from people, the better. I want to know what I screwed up. I want to know what I did well. And I want to be ready for my next game. I'm excited for it. I went off on a tangent on that. Let's get to wrapping this whole thing up. All right, we've got 3 questions this week. I will answer them as I ask them. First question: if your game has rough edges that you have not noticed, where would they be hiding? I would say for Soot, I would say it's probably, if the rough edges are hiding from me, it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be visuals, and I think it would be, I think it would have to do with level design. I think because of the number of levels and the difficulty in separating myself from the levels, in terms of understanding how hard they are to play and all that stuff, because I'm too familiar with them, I think that's a place that they would hide. And I think that they would hide in the visuals because of just the nature of developing visual art skills and the difficulty of that skill set, right? What creative skills, this is the second question, sorry, moving on. What creative skills call to you right now? What creative skills calling to you right now? Narrative, constructing a narrative, telling a story, creating a plot, creating characters, having this drive. When I made the trailer for Soot, I was like, oh, this is an element of this game that I wish I could put in, because it's there. There's this whole narrative in my head about this little ball of soot trying to escape this place, and it's there's all this stuff. I want him to be talking to other little things in the fireplace. It's a whole thing, and it's not in the game. And it was never gonna be in the game. It was never planned to be in the game. But I can sense this craving to create a narrative, and that's really calling to me, and I think that's going to guide the direction of my next project. Third question, and I'm not going to fully answer this because it might reveal too much about what I'm thinking about for my next project. Third question is, what feasible game do you wish existed? So not just what game do you wish existed, because then we're all going to be oh, a perfect simulation of space, right? A perfect this, but no, what feasible game do you wish existed? What interesting theme hasn't been explored? And I kind of think of this, I think about anime, right? And I look at anime and I go, there's an incredible over 100 episode anime about baking bread. You know? Games can do this too. It's this thing where you're like, I'm just so passionate about yarn, and I just want to make a whole game about yarn, just manufacturing yarn. You can do that. And then what genre do you want it to be in? What weirdo game do you really wish existed? And then just like explore that a little bit, see where the market kind of thing is if you're trying to make it marketable, or if you're just trying to make something that you really love. I think the more intense your theming is, it can make it more time intense because of like art assets and all this stuff, right? But I think it's cool. And am I gonna fully answer this? Not really. I'm stuck on one idea right now, and I want to. I mean, there's a few things that I wish existed. Let's go with this. I want more fishing games. I want, but not like I want things like Moonglow Bay is a fishing game that I was really excited for. That like unfortunately they're still working on fixing up some bugs, and I haven't been able to sink my teeth into it. But I like things like Dredge, Like I like a good weird fishing game, not like Bass Pro Fisher whatever year, like not like realistic fishing games. I'm not into that. I want more fishing games. I want weird fishing games. I want there to be this whole weird subgenre of like bizarre, weird, like crazy versions of a fishing game. Like Pokemon, but everything is just a fish. I don't know. I just have, I think that there's some weird game deep in there that I want. I don't know what it is. I have one pitch for what it is, actually. I have one idea of a fishing game that I want to make, but it's a weird one, and that's gonna be one of those projects that I just do one day and it makes $0 and it's fine and I'm just very happy about it, right? It's gonna be one of those. I'm gonna put way too much work into it. I'm gonna finish it. I'm gonna show it to the world, and everybody's gonna go, nobody asked for this. What are you doing, dude? Why did you do this? So yeah, that'll happen one day. It's like 10 years from now. And you know what? If somebody else makes it in the meantime, then I don't have to make it. Then I just get to play it. Thank God, because like it's so niche, so weird. Sorry, that was vague, but whatever. I don't really know what the idea is super clearly anyway. Like it's hard to like, you have an idea, you can see it in your head, and then you start putting it on paper and you're like, I have no idea what this actually is. And then you keep putting it on paper until now you're making the game, and yeah, it becomes a whole thing. It really rolls out of control. All right. The tip for this week is very simple. Keep at it. Every scary new thing is a lot easier than you expect. And maybe to expand on that, don't continue thinking about something for too long. Think about it, assess it, and then go. There's a big difference between assessing and ruminating. Right? Decide, go. The longer I think about something, the harder it becomes to do. And that's not good. Because then I start planning exactly how it's going to go and all this stuff, and it's a problem. But as I was finishing up releasing this game, as I was finishing getting all this stuff ready, I kind of realized, every time I run into a scary new thing, I just work on it and then it's fine. Like I'm just like, that was easier than I thought it was going to be. That has been the entire, I'll talk about this in a later episode. The entire process of making a game has been, wow, this is going to be so difficult. And then I do it and I'm like, well, that was easier than I thought. And then I do the next thing and I'm like, well, that was hard, but now I know how to do it. So it was easier than I thought. Like in retrospect, it's always easier because now you know how to do it. So your memory kind of plays games with you on that anyway, which is amazing because then you get overconfident and then you can just try anything. And then by the time you get through it, you're like, yeah, that wasn't that bad. It's beautiful. Give it a shot. That's everything. Excuse me. My voice is giving out on me. That is everything that I have for you this week. Oh man, by the time I record my next episode, Soot will be released. Isn't that's crazy. some of you have heard a huge chunk of this journey. Isn't that's wild, dude. I strongly encourage everyone out there to make stuff. Make stuff. Just it's so good. It's so enjoyable. I'm going to talk about this in a future episode and like the impact that it's had on me and all this stuff. We'll do a whole breakdown, whatever. But the takeaway is get out there and make some stuff or just enjoy some stuff and do whatever it is that you want to do. Don't hold yourself back too much, as long as what you want to do is like generally a net positive on the world. You know what I'm saying? That's everything. Have a good week. If you get a chance, pick up my game, give it a play. It's on Steam. It's $1. It'll probably be on H2. I need to do that. Yeah. Hit me up. If you've got cool games you're making, hit me up. anxiousbuddhagames@gmail.com. Or if you want a free key of the game because you don't want to buy it. All good. That's it. I'm a little rambly because I'm tired. So I'm going to let you go now. Have a good week. I will see you next time. Goodbye.